anniversary. And this comes from the Special Assistant on Visual Communication and Personal Photographer to the Vice President, Ms. Novo Isoro. She said this at a media briefing in Abuja.
Yes, it's a photo exhibition thingy. Yeah, but I'd rather talk about our independence. Can we talk about our independence? We're 58 years old. Yes. It's a photo exhibition. What's to talk about? They're just going to start it. It's very exciting. It's for children, and they want, they're going to spend 3 days with them at the villa, and then there's going to be a moving sort of gallery. Fantastic. You know me. I love the arts. But let's talk about our independence.
Yes, I do think it's interesting for our independence they're doing that, because it is supposed to be about the unity of our country, and that's something that we see, especially around now, is put under the test, essentially, right? Because we divide generally along ethnic and religious lines, and that's a big issue for us as at 58. How far do you think we've come in actually developing that unity?
I would really like to talk about the unity of our needs. Because we keep forgetting that the unity of our needs is really what keeps us going as human beings. And yes, how far have we come? Look, this is a hard question. I would like to start on the positive. Actually, okay. I think we've made some really strong strides forward. For those of us who didn't grow up here after a short while, or should I say, who left here when they were very young and having come back to live here, when you think of the Nigeria you used to visit, and the Nigeria that I moved to, and in the 10 years that I've been in this country, the changes and the progress that I've seen, yes, they are not great strides, but they are positive strides. One of the things that excites me is the way the people of Lagos, the people of Nigeria seem to take hold of the environment and turn it into much more than what the government is making out of it. That I find very exciting, it's very invigorating, and it's to be celebrated. As to how much is left in my pocket when I do want to go to Folu's bar or go to Gbolahan's nightclub or, Ayo's, sort of legal firm, how much is left in my pocket is what we've got to keep talking about, because that's the thing. We've talking about inflation, we're talking about the economy. Is the economy great? No, it isn't. But really, can we just take a step back and think about it? Most countries go into recession.
Yes.
I think the cycle of recession is roughly around 8 years, every 8 years or so. All right. As of the time everybody else was in recession, Nigeria wasn't in recession. We were living on our false economy where we believed money was never going to run out, etc., etc. Now, then it got to our turn for a recession, and then we start crying wolf and we start screaming blood, etc., etc. It's a recession, guys. Get over it. They told us we're out of the recession. How do you get out of recession? You've got to spend your way out of it. So on one hand, we're broke. On the other hand, we're borrowing, and we've got to get out of this thing. So we're in a double-edged sword. So how is Nigeria doing at the age of 58?
Not too bad, not too good. Just
comment.
Go on,
let's
Ayo.
move on very quickly for time reasons.
Okay.
We don't have time for extra comments on that.
Okay,
but let's go into the next story. Gbolahan.
Okay, this one from the Vanguard newspaper says Labour suspends strike. The organised Labour yesterday announced the suspension of a nationwide strike over the indefinite suspension of the minimum wage negotiation by the federal government. And according to the president of the Labour Congress, that's Ayuba Waba, he said to follow the firm commitment that the federal government has to reopen negotiations through the National Minimum Wage Tripartite Committee. It's chaired by the Minister of Housing and Urban Development, that's Ama Pepo. What do you think about this, Gbolahan?
Well, it's refreshing to see that Labour actually works on the weekend as well, because yesterday when I saw this news flash up as well that Labour's called off the strike on a Sunday, I'm thinking, okay, some people are actually working on the weekends as well and not leaving it over till Monday or Tuesday for calling off the strike. Well, eventually the government has succumbed, and they've actually decided to come back or reconvene at the table to discuss this minimum wage issue that we've been talking about for months now. Of course, when we look at the situation, it was right for Labour to have gone on strike, because you can't actually have asked for a tripartite meeting to discuss minimum wage issues and then all of a sudden you call off the tripartite meeting as well, getting close to when the report was meant to be submitted. So of course they also gave a 2 weeks ultimatum before going on the strike as well, but as usual our government never listens to anything else but strikes, and it wasn't until Labour actually intended to go on the strike, or actually went on the strike, did they reconvene the meeting back. But the main area I'll be looking at is how effective was the strike.
They're saying they're giving them the benefit of doubt, you know. That's why they're reconvening on October 4th and 5th. But here's the thing: do you think that they can actually go from 18 to 65,000, seeing the way Nigeria is shaped at this point in time?
I think my own concern is there are two issues here. One, do the laborers deserve a wage increase when we look at inflation over the years? When was the last increase done? This was done in 2011, if I'm correct. 18,000. How far can 18,000 naira get anyone? Would it actually take you home? I doubt that very much. But when we're now talking about the amount and if government can afford it, that's another topic on its own. So of course I think we should actually be having this discussion of a minimum wage when we're looking at government officials earning about $65,000 a month or so in wages or so, and here we have someone actually earning, how much are we talking about? Less than $50. Actually, there was actually a survey that was done, and Nigeria is one of the lowest minimum wage earners
In the world.
in Africa. So
All right.
And our national assemblies are the highest paid.
Thank you
go.
so much for that one. Let's come to you, Ayo, with this one. This one from ThisDay newspaper says President Muhammadu Buhari has accepted the resignation of Mrs. Aisha Alhassan as Minister of Women Affairs and has approved the appointment of Ms. Aisha Abubakar, who is currently the Minister for State for Industry, Trade and Investment, to oversee the Women Affairs Ministry while still holding her substantive portfolio.
Her substantive portfolio.
Excuse me, yes. For Trade and Investment Ministry, basically.
Okay, I don't know what the kind of contract she signed before she became minister, but usually most of the employments contracts always have like minimum of like a month or so of notice for you to give to your employer for you to resign. So for her to resign almost immediately, and the president didn't have any issue with that. It looks good, okay, but I think this was coming already. I don't think she would have been surprised that she wasn't going to get the APC ticket anyway. So I think she already had a plan B of going to the UDP anyway.
So what you're saying is the resignation was because she didn't get her ticket for...
Yes, she stated it. I mean, the reason she decamped, and for her to decamp, she had to leave the ruling party. And the thing is, if the president actually wanted to be petty, I don't know what the contract is though, but if the contract has that clause of a month notice, he could decide to hold on to that, and then maybe within that period she will lose the entire ticket. But he decided not to do that. She's gone to the UDP. I wish her the best there. She's called Mama Taraba. So let's see if she'll be able to pull it off over there.
And see if she wins the governorship ticket over there. Okay, let's talk about a story from the Punch newspaper, shall we? This one says IDPs ready to return to their communities. Also coming back to you with this one, Ayo. It says the Presidential Committee on the Northeast Initiative has said internally displaced persons were willing to return to their communities in Borno, Yobe, Adamawa, and other parts of the Northeast. The Vice Chairman, PCNI, Tijani Tumasa, explained that the agency was working with the state governments in the region to prepare for the return and rehabilitation of the displaced citizens. Do you think it's too soon?
See, the people that were displaced definitely will have the desire to return to their homes. The question should be, are their homes actually good enough to be returned to as of now? And then we can say that they're giving the assurance saying that the Nigerian military has been able to be successful over those places and they're well secured now. But I hope this is not just sound bites. I hope this is for real, because it's going to be more devastating for them to return and then fall into the hands of this terrorist group again. So yes, it's a good thing for them to return. Is it too soon? It will depend on really what is on ground. Now, we know already that most of the things we see in the newspapers are not actually the truth. So I just hope that for their own sake and for the sake of us Nigerians, when they return home, they don't fall back into the hands of these predators.
Ayo, do you find it curious that it's the presidential committee that's announcing that the internally displaced persons say that they are willing to return?
Well, who else is going to do you think they have an association or something?
Actually, but they do have spokespeople that tend to negotiate with the government, and when it comes to whether it's a lawsuit or pushing, there tends to be one person or at least a group or a body who will stand up and say, listen, this is what we want. Earlier in the year, we'd also seen the same article or this same sort of story saying, oh yes, they're going to be relocated. And at the time, we did have a body that came out and said, well, we're not ready. It's not really safe yet.
Well, truthfully, I wouldn't be surprised because I'm seeing a little bit of election undertone here, like trying to make it look like they're doing quite well. But like I said, normally they'll have the desire to return home, definitely.
Yes.
But I hope their homes are ready to be returned to.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, do keep sending in your messages to us. The WhatsApp number is 0809 444 0981. You can also tweet at us. Just use the hashtag freshlypressed981 if you want to get your messages in, and we'll read them out over the airwaves. But up next, we have the story in from the Guardian newspaper, Gbolahan, coming to you for this one. Bayelsa is suing the federal government for draining the federation account through subsidy. So the state of Bayelsa have dragged the Attorney General of the Federation, AGF, to the Supreme Court, arguing that the 6.43 trillion naira that was claimed to have been spent by the federal government on petroleum subsidy was kept as what they call a withheld fund. So they're saying the various activities of the government under this petroleum subsidy regime scheme has resulted in a continuous dwindling of the Federation account to the detriment of the state. So they do not want the federal government to be able to touch any of the proceeds essentially going forward. Well, your thoughts on this interesting case that's been taken before the Supreme Court?
Well, very interesting. This is the same subsidy that government actually said didn't exist, before they came into power, and now we're now having discussions of subsidies and money is not being appropriated for. I think right now at the moment it's actually being called under recovery, if I'm correct, with the NNPC or so, and not a lot of people really do understand what's going on at the NNPC at the moment now. A lot of all these subsidy payments isn't actually even passed through the budget as well, doesn't actually go through the Senate for approval. So there's a lot of issues that is going on with the NNPC at the moment. And this article actually points out as well too that what usually happens with the FAC allocations and money that comes in from the NNPC is that obviously they actually deduct cost first, and there are about three major cost items that are usually deducted before the money is actually disbursed into the federal account. So sometimes you often wonder as well, we've been talking about making the NNPC transparent, and this was one of the agendas that this government actually raised or pointed out when they were coming into power as well, so that they were going to actually make the NNPC transparent. We've been talking about the petroleum industrial bill that has been lingering along in the Senate for years now, and nothing has been done about that. Obviously, that has actually been split into three parts now.
They're taking their time to try and pass this. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have a lot of issues with our cash cow. How transparent is our cash cow? That's what this article raises.
So essentially, this is really just an issue of transparency and has been for decades. Because that's also why they had to split the PIB into the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill and the other factions, because no one seems to really understand how it works and how it's supposed to keep working. In essence,
it's a major issue, and
well, yeah.
We keep on waiting and watching.
Happy independence to us. Let's move on. We've got more stories. This is a serious one, actually. Ayo, coming to you for this. So gunmen have killed about 14 people and injured scores in Benue. The Vanguard newspaper reports. Now, it's been separate attacks in different communities in Ukum and Okwoku local government areas of the state. Now, one of the major issues here is that Boko Haram itself executed one of its own commanders who was planning on defecting and surrendering themselves to the Nigerian military. That's the commander and 300 others. Now, it's very interesting because the story talks about how they're tired of senseless violence, they're tired of the killings, and really the only reason this commander became such an effective force for Boko Haram is because he used to own several hundred cows, and Boko Haram seized his cows as means of livelihood, and so he was forced to work for them, and he was rather effective because he knew the lay of the land. What does this say to you about the way that our government is going about dealing with Boko Haram and the way that the general public perceives this menace? Because if you have such men who are trying to break free and trying to step away from that, should not more be done to make sure that happens? That's the most effective way of achieving long-term peace.
You see, I strongly believe that there's so many people like him that are in the circle of Boko Haram and other terrorist groups. If you remember this movie, Beast of No Nation,
yes,
kind of opened our eyes to stories of how people are
recruited and
recruited into
forced.
and forced into it. So then you now have the case of these people that are trying to leave, they have no way of leaving. So they have to fight, not really because they really want to fight, but they have to fight for the terrorist group. Now, if you go through the story, I think there are actually two parts of the story.
Yes.
They might not actually be linked because even they are saying they're still trying to find the cause of the shooting.
Some of the sporadic shootings, because it seems
so
as though
they're not sure, but they said it came after the killing of the commander that was trying to, and there was a video also that was, I don't know why that kind of video was how it got circulated and all that. But it's a good story because we, at least now we know that there's some set of people that want to leave. And there was a statement that he made. He said, we are tired of this senseless act of terrorism. So even they inside are tired of it. But to think of the fact that the reason why he joined them was because his livestock was seized, in itself is sad. And we have people in which they have, we've had cases of when we have those ladies. There was a time in which we were having young girls
yes, being used
as suicide bombers. And
children,
then when children actually are 13-year-olds, really young as 9. And then the story was that their family were kept somewhere and they said, if you don't go, we're going to kill them. These are stories, and that's why beyond just using brute force, we need to have an intelligent part of the army that has to think of this. But and I think they're relatively doing quite well with that, because I remember when they get some of these terrorist groups, some of them that surrender, especially they are retrained and then reoriented and brought back into the society. So let's just hope for the best.
Thank you very much. It would seem when we're looking for intelligence, that's what our DSS should be doing. But we'll come to that DSS story in just a bit. Instead, let's talk about Lagos, okay? A lot of interesting things are going on in Lagos in the political scene. And the Premium Times reports on Lagos 2019 saying Tinubu dumps Ambode and formally endorses Sanwo-Olu. Now, we go through this article, which essentially talks about how Akinwumi Ambode has declared, our current governor has said, listen, he is going to run, but then takes what seems in a speech as several personal shots at Sanwo-Olu, who he says is an alleged criminal and a mental health patient. But then, of course, there has now been a statement put out by Tinubu making a full statement on the governorship primary, and there are a number of important facts or viewpoints that he put. Take us through this story and what you think its impact and the future.
Well, firstly, Jide Sanwo-Olu has actually responded to Ambode and basically just said to him, look, I'm not going to do this dirty war of words with you. We have to respect the people of Lagos State more. I'm sure you're going to regret what you said yesterday when your common sense comes back to you. Exactly. So I thought that was very smart. Now, going back to Tinubu's, Asiwaju's, the press release yesterday. It's interesting on several levels, because even here we've discussed about why is he doing this, why doesn't what's going on between them, and there's so much speculation. And what I always like about Asiwaju is the fact that when he answers, he doesn't just answer one person, he answers everybody in one fell swoop, and it's like, okay, you know what, go and digest that and see what you're going to do with it. So very quickly, the part that's so important to me as a Lagosian, and I think that actually talks about the fundamentals of who and what Asiwaju is and what Lagos State is about, is where he says very quickly, all Lagosians were fully participants and justly benefit from the social dividends and improvements brought by this plan. From the common labourer to business leaders to professionals in our industrial civil service, we all were to be partners in a monumental but joint enterprise. None was to be alienated. That's really important. None was to be left out. None were to be pushed aside. This is especially true for those who contributed so much to our development, whether as a business leader who has invested heavily in Lagos, the homeowner who struggles to pay his fair share of taxes, or as someone employed in the hard work of keeping our streets and byways clean so that others may go about their daily task. I mean, that part of this speech is so critically important, and it says so much in such little words that really, honestly, if I were Ambode, I wouldn't just be going away and thinking about what I said about, Sanwo-Olu yesterday, which was quite frankly disgraceful. It was just clutching at, it was so unnecessary, clutching at, rubbish straws that weren't even there. But if I was Akinwumi Ambode, I would have to sit up, and his team, I would have to sit there and think, come on, At which point, how did we get to the point where we stopped respecting the people of Lagos State? Because that's what happened. They stopped respecting the people of Lagos State. I keep going on about that. My Loma women. Remember, I always used to come on here and I would say, my Loma women, where are they? Where are they?
Ms. Ireti, just a couple of questions though. Asiwaju Bola Tinubu does write very well, and it is a very well put together speech.
It's written for him very well.
I encourage either which way. You have to vet what you're going to say. But I do encourage Lagosians to go out and read this story. It is in the Premium Times. But what is interesting is he does talk about a master plan that he came up with after he was elected in 1999. But I guess the problem that a number of people in Lagos do have is, why must we be beholden to someone's plan? Some people would say that it seems almost as though if somebody tries something different or wants to move in a different direction, it is automatically bad. And in a sense, that is what
and he's answered it for you. And he said, I make no pretense that the master plan is perfect. It can always be fine-tuned. However, when a government departs from this plan without compelling reasons, the state and its people have borne the painful consequence of the improper departure. I mean, that's simple, honestly. If it's not about what we've always done in Nigeria, and I remember speaking to General Tafa. General Tafa took over in Abeokuta. And I remember General Tafa saying to me, when he became the head of, what is it they had in the military days? The governor, the equivalent, that's what the administrator. When he became the administrator in Abeokuta, he was told, sir, okay, so this is the project that your predecessor was doing. Let's throw them all away. What would you like to do? He said, bring them all back, because that's what I want to look at.
All right, thank you very much for that, Mr. Ireti. Continuity, that's what Lagos stands for in progress.
Absolutely.
The APC are saying that, they're the first amongst any party to have all primaries being conducted as a general primary, so it's direct primaries. There you go. So it's firmly in your hands if you're a registered party member. We move on though very quickly. DSS have arraigned a man who climbed 50 meters mast in protest. That's a story in from the Daily Times. It's a 26-year-old graduate, Nuruddin Ilyasu. In fact, they first apprehended his brother before they apprehended Nuruddin, and it's a DSS. Now they've taken him before the Chief Magistrate's Court in Abuja. And they're very serious crimes they've charged him with, not just public disturbance, but treasonable action, trespass, and action to commit murder. Is this really what the DSS should be spending its time doing, considering that we have Boko Haram captives who are being forced into terrorism, who would like to become free men, but we see 26-year-old graduates being charged with treasonable action for climbing a mast?
Well, I don't know how far they'll get away with charging treasonable actions over this incidents at the moment. When we look at the story, anyway, the story actually talked about where the mast is actually situated. It says that the mast is overlooking the presidential villa. So sometimes I'm thinking maybe that was the reason why the DSS was involved, although I'm sure the police could have handled that easily. And they actually talked about the reason for the strike, for the protest anyway. You have the two gentlemen, they called 2 for Niger, and the reason for the protest is the issues that they've been having in the country. There's a dysfunctional refinery, they're having issues with a poor government, foreign exchange, loss of value in the foreign exchange. There's so many issues, pretty much all the economic issues that we have in the country, and that's what they're protesting over. So what actually happened is this was meant to be a 7-day hunger strike, but this is the day 2 of the hunger strike, and the gentleman was actually appealed to come off the mast after 2 days of the protest or so. I'm just wondering why he actually.
How do we take our DSS seriously when they bring up charges like this? How do we take them seriously? If you're saying that someone climbing a mast is you're charging him for actions to commit murder, how was he holding a weapon? Was he trying? How exactly? How do we take them seriously?
I think if you attempt suicide, if I'm correct, you can actually be trialed for that.
Yes, you can be tried for that.
So that's the
well,
reason for that.
Thank you very much. Let's carry on though. We've got messages coming through up on our WhatsApp. Elder Jacob says, history might repeat itself come 2019 if the APC cannot resolve its crisis in Lagos. Tinubu and co should be reminded of 1991 elections when SDP was faced with a similar crisis and Lagosians then had to give their votes to Michael Otedola. Those that voted then are still very much alive. Very interesting. Thank you, Elder Jacob. While we've got this one in from IK who says, guys, surely you are not trying to edify Tinubu's epistle. I am not a fan of Ambode, but Tinubu's so-called master plan is a ruse, says IK. Interesting. We've got this one in from Tony Ayo from Ayobo, who says, let me ask whalers if the Tinubu master plan, of which Fashola followed, has yielded good or bad results. We should stop using sentiment, all because we don't love the person of Tinubu. Lagos worked during Tinubu and Fashola's times, and these persons still want continuity and don't want their legacy to be destroyed, says Tony Ayo. Thank you. And this one is in, just before we move on very quickly. Benga Kamu says, so what is treasonable about climbing a mast? Most of these charges will be struck off in court. We only hope so. Final quick story to talk about from the Vanguard newspaper. Police bust a baby factory in Rivers, arrest a cleric and 16 pregnant girls. Too often we hear of these stories, but it is nice when there is an arrest at least made. What are your thoughts on this one, Mr. Ireti?
Well, this is really scary. So 16 pregnant girls were found in a baby factory. I don't think the story doesn't actually confirm whether it is a baby factory, because I've often wondered how you are able to identify a baby factory or if you like an offline sort of birthing church thing, because people do often go to places and give birth, and this is what this guy is saying. He said, look, I had he said, where is it now? There was a day my sister, Esther Joseph, called me to come and help her, saying somebody was sick. So they brought the girl. She brought 2 girls to me and they were having discharge. So I called a midwife to deliver them. Some of the girls come for prayers. They have husbands. One of the pregnant girls arrested, Sandra Solomon, gave birth. I mean, do you understand? So we're quick to...
But the girls are saying,
they are saying
that we were told they
that
sell babies here. So this is a good place for us to go have ourselves looked after. Maybe get some money and leave.
And my point is, we must investigate these things first, okay? Because often also these girls who claim that, you know, the girls are not saying that they held us down. The girls are saying we were told that they sell babies here. So I'm pregnant, I want to come and sell my babies. You know, both parties are at fault. Both parties are illegal, whatever. So we need to investigate. Yes, you know, that's my thing. We need to investigate. But, you know, and be clear on what's going on.
Thank you for that, Miss Ireti. We are done with Freshly Pressed for this morning. Thank you to all our analysts. Find them up on Twitter at eShow1, at Sisioge Lagos, and at Mr. G Quest. Coming up next at 8:15, we're talking sports inside the locker room. And in the final hour, we will be taking a closer look at what's going on for Lagos 2019. For those of you sending in messages about Tinubu and Ambode, that's our discussion. Stay with us.